What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Big Dave back with another episode of Culture Dad's Age of Swords cassette. So what's going on, Mike? How we doing?
I'm doing all right, man. I'm glad to hear you're doing well. You're an old hand at this now. You've had it 4 fucking times.
I know.
It's impressive. That's impressive.
COVID gets me now.
Well, you've mastered it, so there you go. I'm still a novice. I've only had it 1 time confirmed, probably more than that, but whatever. So glad to hear you're doing well. No, I'm excited about this episode. Before we get cracking into it, I do want to mention that by the time this episode drops, it will be probably the day before a release comes out for us in Imperium Press that is actually related, or at least, you know, it could be tied into the topic. It's called The Dark Enlightenment by Nick Land. And Dave, you messaged me a few days ago being like, how the fuck did I not know about this guy, Nick Land? Holy shit.
Yeah, speaking of psychedelic.
Yeah, dude. So I understood exactly what you were talking about when you messaged me that. I'm like, bro, we've got so much to talk about.
Oh man, we should. So, when I get through this, I definitely want to do a whole episode, because I'm reading the Nick Land. I got the copy you sent me, right? I got I've been listening to the things. I got some PDFs, and I'm trying to just like wrap my head around all of it. Nick Land, his philosophy is almost like a fiction setting. You know what I mean? You get immersed. I feel like I'm reading Dune or something.
Yeah.
With all of his, like, you go into his cave and you have to learn all of his lingo and his lexicon and what the fuck. Because Nick Land will like write a whole sentence, and if you're not familiar with him, it just sounds like gibberish. But you're like, you can decode it once you understand what he's talking about. And he says 10 things. The guy's a genius. He's
onto some really, really heavy duty shit too. It's not just the fucking bullshit jargon word salad that we talked about on the last episode. He's actually onto something. He's onto some very important things. I don't agree with all of it, but a lot of it is just really, really fucking good. So this is a book that was written back in 2013. It's not a book. It's a series of essays or articles or blog posts that he wrote back in 2013 or so. Sort of in the wake of the Trayvon Martin stuff or whatever. And it was like him basically sort of this is one of the core like books of Neoreaction. So if you don't know anything about Neoreaction, and you want to dive into the fucking deep end right away, get this book. It's great. Nick Land is really fucking based. I'm going to try and get him maybe to come on an episode with us or something like that. Yeah, he's still alive. He's not old. He's not that old. I mean, being in his 50s or 60s or something like that. Still doing shit. Still like ripping it up on Twitter as Outsideness. That's his handle. Mm-hmm. So yeah, give him a follow. I thought it was fortuitous that this book is going to drop the day after we do this episode. So yeah.
Yeah. So for those of you that haven't figured it out yet, this episode is going to be about psychedelics, not just psychedelics as in the drugs, but psychedelia as a whole. And I thought it would be very appropriate to open this up by reading a stanza from the Emperor of Dreams himself, Clark Ashton Smith, from his poem, The Star Treader from 1920 something.
All right, let's have it.
He says, "A voice cried to me in a dawn of dreams, saying, 'Make haste, the webs of death and birth are brushed away in all the threads of earth, where the breaking spaceward gleams, thine ancient pathway of the suns whose flame is part of thee, and deep gulfs abide coverlee, whose darkness runs through all thy spirit's mystery. Go forth and tread unharmed the blaze of stars wherethrough thou camest in old days, pierce without fear each vast, whose hugeness crushed thee not within the past. A hand strikes off the chains of time, a hand swings back the doors of years. Now fall earth's bonds of gladness and of tears. and opens the straight dream to space sublime.
There's some altered states of consciousness going on there for sure.
Yeah, it's Clark Ashton Smith. It's heavily speculated that he was a user of psychedelics, although it is not known. There's no evidence for it. People just like read his art because it is so psychedelic. And what we're going to get into, there's a few things I want to dispel in this episode, and that is that psychedelics or the use of psychedelics and that psychedelic art is something that generated and created in the 60s. I want to dispel both of those things, and that I want to show the lineage of both the use of the psychedelics. We want to show that it's not, all right, we'll just get into it. We'll demonstrate everything here. So let's get started here. What does it mean when you say psychedelic? So when you hear psychedelic nowadays, a lot of times you the first thing that pops in your head is, like one pill makes you larger, one pill makes you small. And that's like what goes in your head. And yeah, that kind of music in the 60s was psychedelic. But however, the word psychedelic, which is a combination of the word, the Greek word psyche and delos, comes actually from Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley was the first one to put this in one of his books, and he popularized the word. However, he didn't invent the word. He got it from a letter. He was exchanging letters with his friend, who was an English psychologist named Humphrey Osmond. In one of their exchanges in 1956, Humphrey Osmond was speaking with his good friend, Aldous Huxley, which, by the way, is another fiction writer that's an important member of influencing culture back then. But anyway, Aldous Huxley and Humphrey Osmond were exchanging letters. And in the letters, Humphrey Osmond was describing his experience on LSD. So he conjured this word. It was like psychedelic. And Aldous Huxley thought this word was so interesting, he began to put it into his writings. And that's where the word got popularized.
Yeah, no, and I think it's worth breaking down this word etymologically even, because the two terms are quite revealing, actually. The two elements, psyche and delos. Delos is, it means clear or manifest. And it's actually derived from the Proto-Indo-European stem that also gives us Zeus and Jupiter. It means heaven. So that is basically what it means is psyche made clear, right? So that's the second part, is the made manifest or conspicuous or clear. The first part, which is arguably the more important, is psyche, which it derives from a Greek root. It's not clear like where the etymology comes from before the Greek, but it means to blow. It means a kind of a animating principle or a life breath flowing through a person. And it also means spirit or soul. So I mean, for ancient peoples, the breath was coterminous with the soul or with the life or with the animating principle of the person. You'll read in Homer very often that as a man breathes his last, he expires. And actually the word expire is the same as, it means ex. This is from Latin. Ex out, and spire is the same as respire. So when you expire, you literally breathe out your life. So this is what the psyche means in psychedelic. It means the animating principle. It's basically the same thing as the animus or the pneuma or the soul. So it's basically the clarifying of one's soul or spirit or animating principle, which is a very interesting etymology. I mean, we think of psychedelia or psychedelics as something that obscures and just makes you retarded and puts you in a fantasy world or something like that. But the sort of I mean, it's a modern coinage, but the two things put together are actually, they mean something quite different than what it's sort of come to mean.
Yeah. And for heathens listening, psyche would be cognate to our understanding of und.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or
so
I mean, you call prana or something like that.
Yeah, and they have these cognates in all the Indo-European branches because these are common. It's a common soul structure, a common soul stuff that kind of runs between the branches. And very interestingly, there's also somehow there are Egyptian cognates as well, but that's a whole other discussion. But yeah, psychedelics are a part of the deep history of our people. But I guess ostensibly, they kind of the term anyway gets invented in the 20th century, and it sort of really becomes a thing later on in the second half of the 20th century. But what we want to dispel here is the idea that it's an invention of the 60s. It certainly predates that. It has a deep prehistory, but it also has a history in the early 20th century. So yeah.
Yeah. So when we're talking about psychedelics, right, we're talking about the substance of psychedelics. We got to kind of break it down to what that really means. Because as Mike said, some people have never gone into this arena will have no idea. They just kind of think that it's drugs that make you go crazy and et cetera, and they don't really kind of know the differences between different hallucinogens and what they be. This is something that goes back for a long ways in history. You know what I mean? It's the ancient Germanics used what we believe to be psilocybin mushrooms or magic mushrooms of some sort. They were using it. We found it. We found mummies that had cannabis on them, Germanic mummies that had cannabis that were buried with cannabis. So this idea of how could I describe it? This kind of like straight lace ascetic, we use no intoxicants thing is actually a modern invention. Even ancient Christians wouldn't have understood this because what was one of the main jobs of monks back in the Middle Ages was to brew beer. You know what I mean? So this idea of zero intoxicants being used, et cetera, straight laced, whatever, puritanical is 100% a modern invention of Protestantism, of modern Protestantism.
I mean, you need look only so far as the Norse myth of the mead of poetry, right? Odin goes to a lot of trouble to acquire this mead of poetry, right? And this is not just like you're on the piss or something. This is an altered state of consciousness that puts you into a mind space that enables you to actually gain access to the poetic inspiration. Here's that inspire or respire or expire coming back again, right? The mead of poetry is we would think cognate with the idea of Soma, which is this it's actually an Indo-Iranian term. The Indic term is Soma, the Iranian term is Halma, which was a drink that was consumed and is present in the earliest Indo-European scripture that we have, which is the Rig Veda. It's an important part of this. So I'm just going to read a quick passage from the Rig Veda about Soma to give you an idea of what this is about. We have drunk Soma and become immortal. We have attained the light the gods discovered. Now, what may foeman's malice do harm to us? What, O immortal? Mortal man's deception? Absorbed into the heart, be sweet, O Indu, as a kind father to his son, O Soma, as a wise friend to friend. Do thou, wide ruler, O Soma, lengthen out our days for living. These glorious drops that give me freedom have I drunk. So this doesn't sound to me like, some guy chugging back the whiskey and getting absolutely hammered. You know what I mean? This sounds to me like something a little different. This sounds to me like an altered state of consciousness. This isn't just some guy on the piss, right? Yeah. So this is something a little bit different. And Soma is thought to actually have been probably a combination of a few different drugs. One of them is ephedra. That is probably the main constituent of Soma. Another one is poppy or poppy, opiates. Yeah. And the other constituent would be cannabis. Probably it's something of all of those because they all have a long history and in the Indo-European world. linguistic evidence suggests that the word Soma may have come from China. It's probably a loan word that entered into Proto-Indo-Iranian, but it has a long prehistory. And cannabis itself, which is something people think of as very untrad, very un-Indo-European, actually has a long history itself. It was domesticated. We know this. It was domesticated by steppe peoples, by the Yamnaya, by the Sredni Stalg, and so on and so forth, at the same time as it was used in China. So it existed over a wide swath of Eurasia. It's present in archaeological finds of the Bellbeaker people in Holland. So this is a little bit later than those steppe peoples, but still very early in the Indo-European migrations. The Indians had it. The cannabis is one of the 5 sacred plants, which again is a source of soma. It's part of what is it's part of what soma is made of. Herodotus tells us that the Dacians, which are a Balkan Indo-European people, got it from the Thracians and used it in a cultic context. The Scythians certainly had cannabis. I mean, hemp and cannabis, like hemp kind of goes back a little bit further because it's a practical tool. It's a very good textile material. But as far as psychedelics and the altered states of consciousness, the Scythians had that. This is an Indo-Iranian tribe, an Iranian tribe from the second half, from the first millennium BC to kind of the second half of it. Etymological evidence suggests that the name cannabis, which comes from the Greek, actually traces back to the Scythians. Scythian burials have been found with cannabis, which suggests a ritual and perhaps even a necromantic use. So the idea of conjuring the dead by altered states of consciousness. These people didn't actually smoke it in a pipe. That was something that was discovered with the discovery of the New World. They smoked it by basically hotboxing an internal area, like a tent or something like that. So this was a communal ritual. The Celts had it as well, the Hallstatt culture of the 7th to 6th centuries BC. The Norse had it. The Oseberg ship burial has been found with hemp seeds. But interestingly, no actual like hemp cords and no hemp nothing that would suggest use of hemp as a textile or anything that. So it suggests perhaps that they used it for its psychedelic properties as well. It was buried with a Viking noblewoman. So this is all just to say that psychedelics and altered states of consciousness just beyond alcohol goes back a very, very long way with our folk. So, this is something to bear in mind as we go further forward in our discussion here, that this is not something that was just drummed up in the 20th century.
Yeah. And in association with this use of soma, the use of the meat of inspiration, the use of there's evidence all over Western societies, ancient Western societies, that they used psychedelics or mind-altering substances. The Greeks had oracles. Romans were thought to put stuff in their wine and they would get crazy. And the Germanics used mushrooms and magic mushrooms, and this stuff was like all over the place. And a lot of this stuff, it has association with this idea of a realm of dreams, right? The Greeks called this oneiros, right? There's this like realm of dreams, and this idea of a realm of dreams is very closely related to the use of psychedelics, right? That Odin drinks the mead of poetry, and he reaches and does all this stuff, and then there's the Odin, when he spends 9 days on the world tree. This is kind of like a state of long meditation, etc. And he reaches down into the well and gets the secret of the runes, and the well could be interpreted as like, he's reaching into this realm of dreams, and like this idea of this realm of dreams stays. And that's why I started with the Clark Ashton Smith idea, because or poem, because this idea of reaching into this realm of dreams, which is also very closely related with outer space, not necessarily physical material like outer space, but physical material outer space. And a lot of this especially modern art, is very closely blended with this like realm of dreams, right? It's like it kind of becomes this metaphor for this dreamscape that you go into, which really interesting when you look at the shared phenomenon, the shared experience people have when they use DMT or dimethyltryptamine when they go into these trips, and they see things like machine elves and the jester and the great snake, and all of these things that people individually experience that are shared throughout everybody, which it really dispels this kind of modern humanist psychonaut theory that when you take psychedelics, you're going into this inner self, and it strongly suggests that there is this exterior dream realm that people are reaching into, which is what our ancestors believed, right? That this is in this dream realm, they were reaching into this and getting information, getting inspiration, getting ideas from like this realm that they also share with the gods. So let's take a step back and look at what are psychedelics. Okay, we got the ancient stuff mapped out. So what do we understand about psychedelics today? And this is going to be a quick overview for folks that might not have ever even thought about it or understand it. So when you talk about psychedelics, we're talking about one specific category within psychoactive or hallucinogenic substances. And there are three categories. One of them is what we're going to talk about today, which is psychedelics. This is stuff like LSD. This is stuff like psilocybin mushrooms or magic mushrooms. Another category is dissociative hallucinogenics, which is stuff like ketamine, PCP, DXM. DXM is a chemical that is found in stuff like Robitussin, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have deliriants, and deliriants are things like gypsum seed, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's a few drugs a few substances that kind of go in between and have like that are kind of go beyond categories, which is like I mentioned, DMT is one of them. It has kind of like aspects of all of them, but is mostly a psychedelic. You have one that's called ibogaine, which is something that is being strongly used now to cure people of opioid addiction. And that cures people of opioid addiction because it is an agonist, which is, we're going to get into that, but it hits the receptors, the cap opioid receptors in your brain, and it pretty much rewires your brain to not be addicted to opiates. So the American government and the FDA strongly oppose this, and you got people that are going up to like Canada and other countries to use this ibogaine. It literally cures them of opioid addiction. It's a really like a miracle stuff. And then another one that kind of falls in between is Salvinorin A, or Salvia divinorum. Some people, the guys out there, will be familiar with what is called salvia, which is a cousin of the sage plant. But
we will talk about salvia.
We'll talk about salvia. But psychedelic, while it can be it's mostly used as a descriptor, as something that is associated with mystic or distorted or dreamlike states or art, or so. It's like a descriptor term more than it is a drug. But if we're going to talk about the drug, it is effectively a serotonin agonist, as we talked about. It bonds two serotonin receptors together and blocks them and kind of like mixes it all together and creates this dreamlike state. And one of the defining elements of pure psychedelics, not these other things like dissociatives and deliriants, of psychedelics, is it creates what's called synesthesia, which is this what it does is it kind of cross-wires your senses. It cross-wires your input of senses. So you experience one thing and it triggers another sense. This is why people that use high doses of LSD or DMT can, like, they describe that they smell colors, or they can sing words or sing visuals into manifestation, and it completely cross wires. And this is a very important part of the experience of psychedelics, because it really dissolves the boundaries of our understanding of reality, and that's why it kind of like really opens a lot of stuff up. It's a really important part of the experience of psychedelics. But the thing that's special about psychedelics is the active ingredient: psilocybin mushrooms, magic mushrooms, psilocin, LSD, and serotonin, which is naturally created in your brain, as are all tryptamines, right? This stuff already exists in your brain. Dimethyltryptamine, DMT, is already in your brain. It's produced at high levels when you're born, high levels when you die, high levels when you dream, and children produce it at high levels naturally. So they've done scans of the brains of children, and they have found that children, their brains are actually closer to somebody's brain when they're on DMT or on psychedelics or LSD than like average people. And they what they have deduced from this testing is that what happens from the point of when you're a child to when you're adult in modernity is that you prune certain neurons in your brain to better and more efficiently deal with modern industrialized mundane life, which would explain this drastic difference in writing and understanding of the world from modern people, as opposed to in contrast and juxtaposition to ancient people, which had what I describe to be a more poetic. They thought in poetics as opposed to rationalism or analytics like we do today. So this is why ancient people had a much more colorful and vibrant view of the world, a magical view of the world, whereas we today are very pruned and sterilized.
Yeah, and that's interesting. It just brought something to mind that I hadn't. I can only speak generally about it because I haven't read this book in a long time. It's a book called The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind by Julian Jaynes. It's a big mouthful of a title, but basically what he argues here is that consciousness is something that was evolved only very, very recently, like maybe 3,000 years ago. And before that, we did not have consciousness. And one of the things that he basically says is that ancient peoples were not they're not the same as us in terms of their how they thought. Basically what they had was a bifurcated brain, so the left brain and the right brain kind of didn't really talk to each other the way that they currently do. And the way that they did talk to each other was like one of the sides, I forget which one it was effectively like the god that would speak to the other side of the brain and basically issue it commands. And so this is his sort of like explanation of why we had sort of like gods and things like that. It's a very materialistic kind of explanation of this phenomenon and everything like that. But it reminded me a lot of that because of what you were saying about how ancient peoples thought very differently than us in these ways, and especially like in terms of the psychedelic experience and that sort of like weird cross-wiring that's kind of like going on. And you mentioned children as well. That's very interesting that you say. I wasn't aware of this, that the children's brains get, I mean, obviously they change and grow over time, but that certain neurons get rewired to work differently than they did when in adulthood. If you talk to a child, if you sort of get an idea of how children think, it's very different than the way that adults think in many, many ways. I mean, there's a reason why folk tales and why nursery rhymes and why simple stories like fairy tales appeal to children. Is because children inhabit this realm that's very different than what adults inhabit. Children kind of really do, like, there's a reason why there's very little characterization in something like Beauty and the Beast or Cinderella or folk tales in general, right? There's very little sketching out of characters because basically the folk tale is very much a archetypal world. So you don't really have, like, I mean, if you read something like, I don't know, even something like Tolkien, which has got a lot of folktale elements in it, there's identifiable characters. Frodo has a personality. Gandalf has a personality. Saruman has a personality, and so on and so forth. In the folktale, you don't really get a personality out of the characters. It's really just the interaction between archetypes. It's the interaction between, the old crone and the prince. Like in Beauty and the Beast, the beginning of the story, what happens is that this old crone comes and asks The prince, if she can stay at his place because she needs somewhere to stay for the night, he refuses her. She turns him into a beast, and then the story proceeds from there. You don't really get much characterization. You just get this interaction of archetypes. And children inhabit this world too. Children are very much more attuned to this archetypal view of the world. So yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned that they sort of inhabit something differently. And I think that psychedelics itself kind of puts you into this archetypal world kind of thing, which is, I think, part of why you see the convergence between, I've never done DMT myself, but a lot of people who do it end up having similar experiences, see similar visions, have similar characters and beings that actually that they encounter in their trips, and that very much is convergent, because I think what something like DMT does, as well as other psychedelics, in different ways, is it puts you into this archetypal world. Of course, the world of archetypes is the world that's accessible to everybody in a certain way. So yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense, what you've said about how the brain chemistry works and how it dovetails with the way that children's brain chemistry works, because there's a lot of crossover there in terms of this archetypal worldview.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing of note is this brain activity that experienced by people on psychedelics and by children is very closely similar to how the brain chemistry works when somebody is in deep meditation or prayer, or in using breathing techniques, going back to the sacred breath, like Hindu and like different monks and stuff like this will use their breathing techniques, and our ancestors did this as well, although the specific techniques are kind of lost to time. These like meditative breathing techniques, when you're doing this and you go into deep meditation, you have a similar type of brain activity as well. Your brain begins to release DMT and you go into a similar type of state. So back to the holy breath, the und, or the I forget what it's called with the Greeks and all that, but they're the animus and all that. But yeah, so that's all. It's all connected. It's all interconnected, but not in a really quantitative way. It's more of a qualitative way that all of this kind of connects together in a very psychedelic way, right? So when we look at psychedelics and we look at the ancient stuff, very clearly, psychedelics, not just psychedelic drugs, but psychedelic. The idea of psychedelia is very present in ancient art, is very present in ancient and religious art and religious praxis, like the oracle, et cetera, et cetera. It's also something that it doesn't disappear after that. It continues on with this very clear lineage in art. And like I said before, this idea that psychedelic art started in the 60s is not true. This psychedelia has been present in our art going all the way back from the ancient times, and it never stopped. And probably after the ancient times, one of the most psychedelic forms of art was from a saint in the 11th century, Hildegard von Bingen, and she was a mystic. She was a composer of music. She was said to have the voice of an angel. She was also a polymath. And for people that aren't familiar with the word polymath, just means you have a gigantic fucking brain and you're like smart with a lot of different stuff. And she composed a lot of different music pieces, but one of them that is very well known to have this psychedelic quality is called the Canticles of Ecstasy. And if you can go find it on like YouTube, it's like medieval style singing, but it is very beautiful. It's really incredible. And it's very possible that this woman was either using psychedelic drugs, or was going into a psychedelic state via her like esoteric practices of prayer, or whatever she was doing back then, or whatever they did back then. So and then you can go forward and you can look into the 19th century and some of the very earliest forms of psychedelic music. One was, you get one from a guy named I'm sorry if I'm going to butcher the names, but Hector Berlioz in 1830 wrote it was called Symphonie Fantastique, or Dream of the Witch's Sabbath. And what this was pretty much outlining was this like opium fueled fever dream, and this kind of like it's sort of spooky and scary. And this is something that's very tied with psychedelics. It's not this like, you know, the white rabbit in the white room and like this kind of like, you know, hippie kind of stuff. Psychedelia is very often associated with the dark and the spooky and the horror, right? There's a reason that like cosmic horror, for example, has a lot of psychedelic visualizations, a lot of psychedelic art associated with it, because it's
anybody who's done it more than once or twice knows this, and even some people who've done it once understand this very well.
And then fast forward to some more psychedelic art, or psychedelic music, I should say. You go to 1894, the last bits of the 19th century. Claude Debussy, he wrote he had an orchestral piece called "Prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun," and what he shares with Hector Berlioz is this kind of disjointed, distorted, break the rules, break the boundaries of music to make these kind of like really strange, echoey kind of. It's not going to sound like psychedelic music that me and you guys listening know, but if you hear it, you're like, this was a little weird. This was weird. This was distorted. This was disjointed. This was psychedelic for the time. And it's
very weird. Like this piece and Debussy and like what's going on at this period of time and the Romantic period. We talked a little bit about it in one of our episodes. Is very experimental. This particular piece that Dave's describing is extremely chromatic. It's very atonal. It doesn't really have a tonal key center or any. It keeps shifting around. And it is very kind of, I don't want to say off-putting. I'm looking for another word. It's very unsettling. It's a beautiful piece of music. It's a very famous piece of music. It's one of the most famous of Debussy's compositions. But yeah, I would suggest that people listen to it just to experience it. It's wonderful. But I can see how this would tie into the psychedelic side of things, because it is very. You can imagine someone listening to it at the time, who's used to like, you know, very nice chamber music would be like, what the fuck is this? Like it is psychedelic. It really kind of is. So yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that one up.
Yeah, another one I would throw into this, Shakespeare's Midsummer's Night's Dream is very psychedelic in my opinion.
Yeah, I could see that. Absolutely.
But going back to Debussy, a lot of people kind of pin Debussy as part of the like impressionist art movement, but he during his lifetime actually rejected this. He was very tied in with an art movement that was called Symbolism. And Symbolism, the Symbolist movement is something that would be of great interest to us, because it was very tied in with the Romantic movement. It was very tied in with the folk movements of the time. And I found an excerpt from one of the big symbolist thinkers of the time, Jean Marissa, and I'm going to read an excerpt from one of his like manifesto about this. He said, thus in this art movement, representations of nature, human activities, and all real life events don't stand on their own. They are rather veiled reflections of the senses, painting to archetypal meanings through their esoteric connections, right? This is like what Mike just said, that in like the folk tales and how children think, this psychedelic stuff, when people are on DMT, there's not really personalities to characters. They're archetypes. It speaks in symbols and archetypes and this weird psychedelic shit. So this symbolist movement, in my opinion, which was very tied to like Romanticism and stuff like that, was very psychedelic. It was like the early incarnations of psychedelics. So
symbolism fucking rules. Just a little like aside here. All of our guys should check this out and read Charles Baudelaire's Les Fleurs du Mal. This is a very, very important collection of French poetry. Edgar Allan Poe could be classed as symbolist. The aesthetic continues. You know, it's a lot of it is sort of tied in with the French, which is why it's associated with Debussy, Mallarmé, Paul Verlaine, things like that. This is you're right, Dave. Absolutely right to say like these are our guys, kind of thing. They're very dark. There's a very Odinic vibe. The Odinic is gonna come back, and we're gonna keep referencing that throughout this episode because, of course, the Odinic is about transgressing boundaries. We'll set that aside for now. I just wanted to plug Symbolism because it's such a fucking amazing artistic movement.
Yeah. We're going to go further into our guys, right? Symbolism movement was very, very influential on the Italian futurists, right? The Italian futurists were listening to things like Debussy and guys like this, and that really like influenced a lot of their stuff. If you look at there's a manifesto written by a guy named Luigi Russolo. It was called Le Arte dei Rumori, which means the art of art of noise, right? It's the art of noise. Now, what he was getting at is a little bit different than kind of where it goes, but it is part of the lineage here, and I'll show you why. What he was talking about in this is effectively like, in order to appeal for music to appeal to the people in the future, it's going to have to incorporate like sounds of machines and clanking and all of this kind of stuff. And they really did this. They made weird sound machines that went into rooms that made weird echoes and stuff. They made some pretty gnarly, weird, out there sounds. Right? They made a bunch of noise that made it this. Yeah. Now, what this has to do with, it's pretty weird because they kind of like they get inspired by this lineage of psychedelics, of psychedelic art. They kind of take a step to the side, but then it goes right back into line because the sounds that these guys made had a huge influence on a guy named Edgar Varese. Now, Edgar Varese, yeah, Mike knows.
I know where this is going.
You know where this is going. So Edgar Varese heard those sounds, and he created like a bunch of weird stuff too, like this kind of like spacey, bizarre kind of stuff. And he manipulated tape and because he was an engineer and a musician, so he like put these things together to create what we would understand today to be like flange and echo and chorus and a lot of these like these effects that later on become psychedelic music. So there's a straight line from these guys. And in fact, right after Edgar Varese, which Edgar Varese had like there's a lot of psychedelic, like for example, who's the guy? Frank Zappa. Frank Zappa was directly influenced by him, and even had like towards Varese end of his life exchanged letters with the guy. Like this is a direct lineage, and everybody that was adjacent to Frank Zappa. We're talking like the Doors and Cream and pretty much everybody. Everybody started to use, and then there was there's a guy out of Varese's camp that later became like was like the iconic music producer. I can't remember his name for psychedelic music, but this guy went on to produce and record a very small music niche that happened in the early and mid 50s, which kind of blended pulp fiction and music together with like lounge music, which was popular at the time, blended these two together to create like this genre of music that was called space age. It was space age music. And if you guys want to go check it out, it was actually really, really cool and got like discarded very early on when like the 60s rock, psychedelic rock came out. But if you go listen to guys like Eddie Baxter, there's a guy named Eddie Baxter. One of his hit songs is called Handful of Stars. There's a guy named Bobby Christian. I would suggest his album Strings for a Space Age. Another group called Astro Sounds. They had an album called From Beyond the Year 2000. And another one, Ron Goodwin, called Music in Orbit. And if you go listen to these guys, there's this, like I mentioned before, this connection between outer space and psychedelics and all of this stuff and pulp fiction and like all science fiction, all of this stuff kind of like blends together to create this cool thing. And that that later became psychedelic rock, space rock, and acid rock, which, you know, you can just go look it up, and like all of the stuff in the 60s, which I'm not going to talk about because you could just go find like thousands of documentaries on this. And then later, this psychedelic theme goes into 70s and 80s sci-fi and fantasy and horror art, painting, and like what we even know today, right? So it's still alive today. So this is a direct art lineage that goes all the way back to ancient times once again.
Yeah, that was great, actually. That was a real blast from the past, Dave, because a lot of what you're talking about there is shit that I used to listen to. Like, I have like some records or CDs of Edgar Varese. I actually have a a compilation of noise music that includes some of the original Luigi Russolo L'arte dei rumori recordings, like back in the fucking 20s and 30s and shit, like back when recording was very primitive, you know what I mean? And I'll say this to tie into yet another Culture Dads episode here. This is the lineage from the art of noises and the sort of Dada-esque, like, weird shit that was going on in the early 20th century, the Italian Futurists and all that. The lineage, one of the branches of that, that river, one of the tributaries that sort of flowed out of it or whatever, is post-punk, which we spoke about in a whole episode. Mm-hmm. So this is, all of these things are sort of interconnected. And interestingly about Frank Zappa, Frank was like totally anti-drugs. He did not do them. He would fire band members that would do them and everything like that. But he created psychedelic music. And, he was very influenced by this tradition. And so it's a long and venerable tradition. And there's a lot more to it than some like hippie dude that's just like cooked on LSD in 1968 or something like that. So there's so much to it. So did you want to say anything more about the history, or should we move on to some more about the actual experience?
I did want to touch on about like the hippie movement in the 60s, like the psychedelics and
I guess stuff. We have to talk about it, don't we? Yes. Just
a quick touch on it. I feel that we in our sphere kind of write it all off as like lousy, right? Because we kind of picture these like hippie dippy retards. We associate
the politics are just so idiotic too.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I would say that we associate with like this politics and like Marxism, and this is where the KGB infiltrated, and there's a lot of who's in the mix, and we get a lot of this stuff, but that's not really what it was about. It was a movement that was really co-opted, and I actually learned about this because I had a friend that I used to work with. He's passed away, rest in peace, but he had an uncle that was an old head hippie dude. His name was Uncle Danny. He was a guy from Virginia, and he had a little bit of Virginia accent. He was an old time hippie dude. He played the guitar, and he was like the real deal old hippie guy. Was a traveling musician. So he was like in the movement. He was at Woodstock, et cetera, et cetera. And the picture that he painted about what happened with that movement is like very different than what I understood it to be. He very much explained it like it started out as this like counterculture against like the puritanical stuff. It was very anti-war. It was very much about returning to it was about rejecting capitalism, consumerism, and returning to like a wholesome existence. Like this, like he's like that free love, like stuff like that wasn't in there. And it started because I asked him if because I was like a teenager at the time, and I was like, you guys like did a bunch of gay shit, and that pissed him off. He's like, what? He's like, do I look like some kind of to you? He got like real pissed at me about it. He's like, apparently none of that gay shit was like in there. Like apparently like they like the OG, like the original like hippies looked at like Janis Joplin as and like Jim Morrison as plants. He's like, the corporations put them there. They weren't original, like they weren't into it. And then like he said, a bunch of posers came in and like used it as like a party thing, and it became mainstream. And then like the commies came in. He's like, and this Uncle Danny, this guy, he was a very religious guy. He had crosses all over his house. He was like, at the time I was like an edgelord atheist. So he's like, he like scolded me for not believing in God. Like these like early hippies weren't like these like fatty kind of like junky like freak douchebags that we picture. They were
Yeah.
guys that were very, very similar. Now they weren't similar in all ways, but we had a lot in common with them. Like they were rejected in the system. They wanted to go back to farming and regular life, and they were against consumerism, because we got to keep in mind the 50s that they were reacting against were extremely consumerist. It was like, buy this new gadget, buy this, consume this. They were eating like what we would call goy slop, right? They were getting these TV dinners that were full of crap. This is when like they rejected the old like traditional recipes, and they started making these like gay, like what we like suburbia things. It was just like it was the 50s weren't as cool as we like think of them as, and the early hippies weren't as gay as we think of them as. It's more complicated than that.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all, actually, that the sort of initial stages of that movement, there was something genuine and organic in that. I'm not at all surprised to hear that, because I know from my own experience that, like, learning quite a bit about the early punk movement, that it's kind of like that, where there was a song written by the Dead Kennedys called Nazi Punks Fuck Off, and the reason why they wrote that song is because it was a giant fucking subculture, that like there was a lot of different sort of different currents that were going on in the early punk scene, and a lot of them had nothing to do with the gay politics that like later came to characterize it. So I'm not surprised about the 60s in that regard either, and I'm totally with you about like the 50s being sort of, not being a little black-pilled on the 50s, shall we say, because I honestly find the music of that time to be extremely boring and extremely like uninteresting and just like kind of shitty. So I just don't see a lot of interesting stuff coming out of the culture there, except for, I guess there are some crazy cool stuff that going on there. Actually, of that lineage that you talked about in terms of like the noise music, there was some very interesting classical music going on in the 50s, but which is psychedelic in its own way. So that's good to clear that up. It's good to sort of try and give these people their due, the hippies their due, because ultimately, at the end of the day, you can see some strains of ecofascism coming out of that. And basically, to take organicity and ecology seriously enough is just to be fascist. So you can understand why your why your Uncle Danny there looked the way that he did, react the way that he did when you said that the hippies were a bunch of fascists.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like there was a lot of it's more complicated than hippies gay 50s based. It's pretty much what I'm getting at here.
Yeah, for sure. So
now speaking of that, me and you, Mr. Mike, we come from a generation that experimented with some of these substances, and I had a phase that I was what you would call a psychonaut, right? Oh, yeah. And you did as well. So we want to just kind of share our experiences using these substances, and some were positive and some were very negative. I did some, like I mentioned before, there's a few different classifications. I did do some deliriants. I've done disassociatives, and I have some stories that are kind of scary and some that are kind of like embarrassing and funny. And then I have some ones that are they're very meaningful and were very spiritual for me. So Mike, tell us how you got into it, and tell us about some of your experiences, bro.
So I want to before I talk about drugs, I want to talk about my first altered state of consciousness experience, because this is something I only realized very much later after I had done psychedelics, that this had happened and that it was what it was. So when I was a kid, do you ever have something where like, maybe not even when you're a kid, but like where you hear the same word over and over again, like somebody uses the same word too often, and you're just like, it starts to sound weird. Have you ever had that happen? Most people have, like, know what I'm talking about. Have you ever had that happen? Yeah. So when you're a kid, you just kind of fuck around and you're just being an idiot and just being silly and just like doing stuff that like no normal person would ever do when they're grown up, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things that I did was I just decided that I was going to say this one word over and over again, and like just because I was bored or something. I had nothing else to do. Like when you're a kid, you just got nothing to do. You're bored. So I just took this word, turtle, and I said it over and over again. I was like, turtle, and just like repeat the word maybe 20 times or something like that. And, you know, at first, of course, the word, it conjures up something familiar. It's the animal, naturally. And then you keep saying it, and then you're just like sort of daydreaming and be like, you're picturing a turtle swimming in the ocean, doing turtle things or whatever. And then I kept repeating this word, and then you're kind of like thinking about maybe like a cartoonish one splashing in the mud or something. And then you keep repeating it, and you're just like, well, you know, what do turtles actually do anyway? Like, what are turtle priorities? What are these pressing turtle things that they do day in and day out? Like, what's the hurly-burly of ordinary turtle life like, right? And then you just keep repeating the word, and you're like, that's a weird-sounding word. And it's, okay, right. And you repeat turtle over and over and over again. You're just like, that kind of sounds like something foul, like, you know, the word just kind of sounds weird or whatever. And then you're like, maybe it sounds like a sort of like awkward gait, like someone's turtling along or something like that. Or like maybe it's one of these strange little things that, like, you know, kids love or whatever, and then they forget about it and whatever. And then you go on and on and on, repeat this word, and it just keeps going and going. And after enough repetition, the word starts to lose its meaning. And then you just, for some reason, I just kept going, and like thoughts like pile up one after the other. You don't know what the word means. You've lost the thread of what this word even means. The symbols are just obscure behind like a fog of sounds. And then I just kept going and kept going and kept going until the word turtle was not a word at all, but like a kind of incantation, almost a formula, a sort of like invocation, where I had lost my place within this contextual network of words. And I just kept repeating this word. I may have even not been repeating the word as you and I know the sound. It might have been a different word by this time, but with enough persistence, even the network of words started to melt away, where not only did I not understand what the word turtle meant, but I didn't understand what any word at all meant. Speech was completely outside the realm of possibility for me. And, you know, even just like verbal thought at all wasn't available. And I just kept going and kept going until I had to stop, because I was just in this other world, this daze of, like, what am I, where am I even right now? I couldn't speak like to my parents. They would come up and say something to me, and I'd just be like, you know, like I could not say anything for about 20 minutes. It took me a while to recover. And then later on, as you know, I don't know how old I would have been, 8, 9 years old, something, when this happened. Later on, after discovering things like, you know, religion and psychedelics and other things like that, you know, as you grow older, I discovered that what I had stumbled into inadvertently is now what we would call a mantra that puts you into a complete other psychedelic space, and a complete other state of consciousness. Right? That opens you up in a way that is completely different to a normal sort of psychological state. So anyway, without belaboring the point, I think we all understand what I'm getting at here. That was my first experience with an altered state of consciousness, and it had nothing to do with drugs, and it was the most intense, it was one of the most intense experiences I've ever had in my life.
That's really cool. I'll be honest with you. That's really cool. You know, when I was a kid, I have maybe it's just because I'm naturally a big imagination guy. But speaking of like kids having like that kind of brain chemistry, I have memories from when I was a kid where I would see like you know, I guess supernatural creatures, you know, fairies or like different beings or whatever. And they're like clear as day to me. And I can't discern whether I actually saw them or if they were just like something I imagined or something from I recall them as if they are memories, but I can't discern whether or not it was like imaginative or if I actually saw it. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's pretty weird that your childhood memories become this like dream space, at least for me anyways. Do you have that?
Oh, definitely. Like, there's certainly, I have certain very early memories. I think they're early anyway. I don't know if maybe I just dreamed it up or something, that are very much like that are very much kind of like psychedelic, and like seeing weird creatures, or like having these vague impressions of, even just like a chromatic, like, you know, color spectrum or something like that, that just calls to mind a certain period of time or something like that. I do know what you're talking about, and it's good that we already sort of touched on, you know, the crossover between childhood and children's consciousness and psychedelics or altered states of consciousness, because I feel that that's what I experienced with that mantra. That I was in a state of, let's just say, openness to suggestion that would have been harder to achieve as an adult, kind of thing. And that, yeah, when you're a kid, that kind of stuff comes a lot more easily. And for some people, they never really get that, or like as kids, they just don't have that same, you know, that's just not part of their character. And so they require things like psychedelics to do that. I mean, this is something that Terence McKenna has talked about, which is that basically what psychedelics are is it's almost like a hack of spiritual progression, where you can almost get like, you almost just speed run through decades of like spiritual attainment and enlightenment, and you just go straight there, kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. So psychedelics will kind of get you into that same headspace that you would attain, presumably anyway, according to him, if you had been meditating for forever and finally had this like realization, or perhaps as a child you had like some crazy experience, or even in a dream state. I think we should do a whole episode on dreams, but you know, there's very fertile crossover between dreams and psychedelics. I have always had crazy ass dreams all throughout my life, and there was a period of time where I was actually writing them down studiously, because I would have these like recurring dreams that would sort of like, you know, be episodes that would just continue on night after night or whatever, in this one or a handful of worlds and things like that. So you know, there's again crossover with psychedelics and DMT and all that.
Yeah, like I'm another person. I've always had very vivid, elaborate dreams, always, as far as I can remember. But there was a period of time that I kind of like stopped having that. You know what I mean? It was like, I guess some years ago. It was kind of like, you know, when I really started getting into politics again, about 2015. I started following news cycles, and I was like a libertarian at this point, like around going into the Trump election and stuff like that. And then some years back, I kind of had this switch in my head somehow. And it was like going back, like so I got to come back home to my faith. And I started like really, you know, getting back into devotions and back into my faith and everything. Like something switched. And I was like, I need to start thinking poetically instead of analytically. And then my dreams started coming rushing back. And then it's been this cycle. And all of a sudden I can now play guitar again. I can now sing again. Yeah. I can now write again. I'm able to write stories and poetry again. It's like literally it switched on me. Like it all came back, and these vivid dreams start coming back. And now it's like, I actually just made a post the other day about I have a reoccurring dream where I'm somebody else, and I'm the same guy every single time.
I saw that. Yeah, that's crazy.
Just some fucking guy named Jeff. It's weird, but it's like something that I have, you know, but yeah, dreams are just pretty much, and this is going to sound crazy, you guys out there, maybe I probably shouldn't reveal this, but most of my theories and just about all of my stories and all of my poems come from my dreams. Like my idea of like the mechanurge and like my poems about the dream space and like all of my stories.
I get that. Absolutely. I get that.
They're from dreams.
Yeah. Well, I can't really say that a lot of like my sort of like the like political theoretical stuff that I do comes out of dreams per se. But a lot of times what will happen for me is that if I'm trying to solve a problem, or if I'm trying to come up with an answer to something, or to resolve a kind of like, an issue that like, a philosophical issue, a lot of times I will solve it immediately after waking up, before I really am fully awake, before I've woken up, I'm conscious, but I'm only half conscious. And a lot of times this is when I get my best thinking done, because you don't quite think rationally or analytically. You think kind of more from the gut. You kind of think more in this archetypal way, in this like, mythopoetic way, shall we say. And a lot of times that is when the most genius intuitions kind of come to you. And a lot of times I would get this. I don't know if I've ever said this on the podcast before, but especially back when I was a musician, I'm sort of in a position, I'm sort of in a state right now where I haven't really been doing much dreaming for a couple of years, probably because of what you just said, similar to me, where it's like, I've just been deep into like politics for a couple of years. But, back when I was playing music and writing music a lot, many times what would happen is I would wake up in the morning and I would just like have this sort of song running through my head. And oftentimes it would come from a dream. Like I would dream that I'm like watching my favorite band playing a song live in concert and be like, fuck, I love that song. This is like my favorite of their tunes. And then I would wake up and I'd be like humming that song and I'd be like, wait a minute. That's not a song by them at all. That's a song that just like came out of fucking nowhere and just landed in my lap. And so instantly I would just kick off the sheets, run over to my guitar, transcribe it before it went away, which would be a process of about 90 seconds before it's gone. This is kind of the stuff that I would get out of dreams, especially like musically, but also even like philosophically. Sometimes, like I say, that you kind of get this aha moment, this eureka moment of solving a problem in this half-conscious state. And I think that psychedelics puts you into a very similar state like that, where you're open to suggestion, where you're kind of thinking laterally, shall we say, or non-rationally, not irrationally, but just like outside of rationality. And that this can actually be very, very useful. You obviously don't want to live your whole life in that state, but to be able to step outside of yourself and inhabit that state from time to time can be very, very useful as a creative thinker.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that all creatives share, and I think it's something that's extremely powerful and also kind of dangerous, because when you have this like process, when your inner framework, your inner processes are poetic. If you don't have a foundation of virtue, if you don't have a foundation that's right, you could very easily become a like flaming degenerate scumbag. You know what I mean? That's why I think that so many musicians and artists, if they aren't like religious people or if they aren't virtuous people, they're scumbags, right? This is just something that we see. So it's like, I think that it's like a double-edged sword, or it can be, right? So
I've seen this happen to people, absolutely, in my many years in various music scenes. I've seen people who are poetic geniuses or creative geniuses absolutely turn into some of the worst human beings ever, because they don't have that foundation, because they are too Odinic and they don't have that Tyrrhic sort of structuring foundation. Absolutely.
So when it comes to like actually like using the substances, I've had
here we are, like what, 70 minutes in almost, and we're just getting to drugs now. Okay.
I told you this is gonna be a big one. So when it comes to like using psychedelics, where should I start? Should I start with the silly stuff, or should I go to the good ones?
Well, maybe start from the beginning. What was your first drug experience, other than maybe alcohol or something?
I mean, I smoked weed like for the first time when I was like,
of course,
13 or something like that. My mom, or maybe it was my dad, had like a stash of like some really old shit, and I snaked it from him and smoked it, and it was like, it was like just some garbage. But I remember like the first time getting baked. I was like 13. I put on Black Sabbath. right? I had to sell my vinyl player. I put
classic
on Black Sabbath and I listened to Planet Caravan. And I mean, I smoked weed because it was like what I thought you're supposed to do. And that was like my first time. And I remember like spacing out real hard listening to Planet Caravan and like writing all these notes for things like stories or whatever. And just like, I started just like getting all weird and creative and stuff like that. So Planet Caravan became like my song that I listened to when I would toke up from that point on. And then my first time, I don't really remember what my first time doing psychedelics really was. I think my first time was probably mushrooms. We did a lot of mushrooms back then. And we didn't really have access to LSD until like all the hippie like festivals started happening in the region. But some of my early ideas or my early experiences of doing mushrooms, one sticks out in my mind where me and a bunch of my buddies, we were teenagers, got our hands on some mushrooms, and we went wild. It was just fun, right? We did the mushrooms, and what's cool about mushrooms is like, it's probably isn't a good word, but it feels very primitive, right? I did the mushrooms, and what was different about me from some of the other guys is some of the other guys would take it and they would just like zone out and be like, oh my God, I wanted to while out. Right. I like ripped my clothes off. I wanted to run in the mud. And like one time, like they're all like spacing out and they're like on the porch. And I'm like in my underwear. It's raining. I'm doing cartwheels in the mud, smashing my face into the mud, painting myself with mud, and like making my brother spray me with a hose while I did cartwheels and just jumping as high as I could, smash. And it was just the feeling of the mud hitting my skin. I just felt like a wild animal and it was fun. Right. It was like this complete like release of the etiquettes of society and like all that. And I just like wanted to while out. And then another early memory was me and one of my buddies. We took a bunch of mushrooms and we're sitting on the porch and we're like, these are bunk. These didn't work. This is like garbage. And we're sitting there and it like starts kicking in like a half hour later. And I remember I realized I was like, okay, I'm tripping out. You get this mushrooms, you get this like grin on your face that you can't get rid of. And I'm like, I look over at him and he's got the same grin and we just like lock eyes and like he runs and like leaps over the porch and I run and we both just take off sprinting into the woods and I turned into like a fucking werewolf or something. And I'm in the woods. I start like taking my clothes off and painting myself with mud. And I like,
this is like a theme.
Yeah, it is a theme. I like that's why they're like they used to say this thing that Dave turned into a werewolf when he did mushrooms. And I fashioned all these like leaves and like sticks on me like armor, and I made like stick weapons. And I'm like walking in the woods like looking for my friend, and like I'm like walking and I like there's like this ravine with this big log going across, and I look across the ravine and I see him and he's all armored up with stick weapons too. He had the same idea. And we just like charge at each other on this giant log, and we have this like epic stick kung fu karate battle on this log. And he like foot sweeps me and we both fall off the log into the water on the rocks, and we just had this epic battle in the woods. We found this like willow tree and we broke these like stems off of it, made whips and like whipped the shit out of each other, kicking each other in the head. We just had this like gnarly fucking battle in the woods all night long until the morning. And the next day we were just completely covered in welts and all bruised up and fucked up. But it was so fun and it was just wild.
That's crazy. Yeah, no, that's interesting how mushrooms they kind of have a different effect on different people. For me, like my experiences on mushrooms were always, I mean, always in a controlled environment where you're with friends and everything like that. But I always had what's the word? How can I describe this? They always had a kind of malevolent vibe to them in some ways. I always felt kind of, there's a darkness to it. And that like I liked, you know what I mean? Where it wasn't like, malevolent is probably the wrong word because it makes it sound bad, but there's definitely well, yeah, exactly. There is a definite Odinic sort of feel to mushrooms that I did not get with LSD. LSD I didn't enjoy quite as much because, I mean, it lasts too long. I did enjoy it. I certainly enjoyed it. There was like, we had like a few friends and I, we had this like series of trips that we would do where we would like rent a hotel room and we would just like box ourselves into this hotel room and nobody was allowed to leave and everybody did like mushrooms or LSD. And it was just like the chaos that would go on in these rooms and the dramas and the crazy shit, like the like Odyssean fucking like journeys that we would go on, just going down the hall to get like a can of Pepsi from the fucking vending machine and back was like reading the fucking Odyssey, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
this kind of like crazy stuff where it's like you just zone in on the minute details of like whatever is going on at the time. And a lot of it just came out with some like absolutely like legendary shit that happened. But for me, the paradigmatic psychedelic experience that I ever had was on salvia. Have you ever done salvia?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, salvia just like takes what I said about like the malevolent side of psychedelics and just turns it up to 11. So for me, it was just like, I did not expect what was coming because, you know, somebody explained to me like, you know, what you do and like how it's going to go and everything. And they're just like, yeah, so all you do is you just take this like bong rip of like this weird kind of weed that you buy at this head shop or whatever. And, then you hold it in for like a long time and then you just trip out, man. It's all like fun and cool and everything. And I was like, all right, sure. I'll try it. So I'm over at my buddy's house and he's just like, okay, so yeah, just take the bong rip, hold it in for like as long as you can and then exhale and just hand me the bong. So I took I took it and I inhaled and, you know, before I even exhaled, it's like, I'm just sitting in the guy's chair and the bong just drops from my hand because I'm just like after 15 seconds of like or whatever or less, I'm in absolute fucking space. So like they had to catch the bong as it was like falling to the ground and like put it back on the table. And the feeling that I had after doing this was like I was actually fairly lucid in my mind. It felt like I was still there and it was like all the surroundings were more or less sort of there, except I had the feeling that the top of my head from about like my eyebrows up had completely disappeared and that there was no distinction between inside and outside, my head and the universe. My mind was just completely, had encompassed the universe. That the like top of my head was sort of the interface between these two things that were not actually two, they were just one now. So I had this like crazy experience, and I remember just being like, holy fuck, this is the most intense thing I've ever had happen in my entire life. And I just remember my buddy being like, hey, can you pass me the lighter? And they did this just to like laugh at me, right? Because like here I am just twitching and being like and like they're just like, hey, can you pass the lighter? I'm like, okay. And then just, you know, struggling for like 2 minutes to just pick up the lighter and like know that it was like something that was distinct from myself and like all this crazy shit. And just to like, then you pick it up and be like, what even is this thing? And then I completely have forgotten that I'm supposed to hand the guy the thing or whatever. And it's just like this crazy experience. And then it's within about 5 minutes, it's basically all over, right? Like it's just this quick, like 5-10 minute blast of just being in absolute like fucking space. And then you're back. But for the rest of the day, you kind of have this like weird afterglow, this very discomforting afterglow of like what just happened. And for a lot of people, you know, because this was like kind of a real thing back in the early 2000s, a lot of people had even more malevolent experiences than that on salvia. I was sort of like the curator or the guy that was like guiding the trip for a bunch of my friends doing this at like various stages. And I saw some of them absolutely fucking tweak out. It was just crazy. So yeah. But Yeah. So what was your salvia experience like?
Oh man, we did when salvia first started. Like you mentioned like the 2000s when it started coming around. I was like everybody was doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like every party, everybody, at least like a few people had to try. Like we made like everybody try it because it's like as you said, it's like you get like a bong or a bowl or like some sort of glass piece, right? The key is you hit it with a torch lighter that gets like all the chemicals out of it, and like they inhale and you got to take it from them because they're going to drop it because they inhale, they hold it, and then like as they're exhaling they're in a different place, and some people spurg, you know, some people like really panic. We had one guy named Joey. He's like, oh, there was something weird with me, call an ambulance. We're like, dude, calm down. He's like, we're not gonna call an ambulance. He goes, all right, call the police. He's like not completely nuts, spurging out. Like I tried to like calm him down, and he like launched me like had hard strength. Like there's like people that really
psychedelic strength.
There was like people like there's some people. I had a girlfriend at the time that like went completely nuts. She started like flailing her arms around like limply, like knocking shit off my counters. She's maybe doing what I'm doing. Like really weird shit. I had a real weird experience. Like one of the clearest ones I remember is I took the hit and like they took the piece from me, and I'm sitting on the chair and I like look at the floor, my basement floor, and it extends out like I'm on a skyscraper, except I am the skyscraper, and there's like these demon voices like in the sky talking to me and like cursing at me in weird tongues, and like this is like in my old basement, so guys would just like stomp cigarettes out on the floor, and at the end of the night we'd sweep them up. So like all the cigarettes on the floor are like laughing at me and mocking me, and I like get mad.
That sounds like a salvia trip.
And I start like fucking stomping on them, and like they're like screaming in pain, and I'm like laughing maniacally as they're like getting stomped on and dying, and I'm like completely nuts. It's like all distorted and bizarre, and like I remember like the whole world goes topsy-turvy and starts spinning, and my body starts getting ripped apart, and like there's like shards of glass everywhere, and like everything's spiky and crystalline, and like it was like bizarre. And like your skin sometimes gets like real, you get pins and needles, right? And that's what I was like experiencing, was the pins and needles, and like immediately your like reality comes back, and guys like, dude, what are you doing? Like, get up off the floor. Like, you all right? Like I fell over, and I was like, it was nuts. It's nuts. Salvia is bizarre.
It is. Yeah. Like it's one of the craziest fucking drugs. And this is like, it's a weed, right? This is not something that like someone cooked up in a lab. It's something that was traditionally used in like,
it's a cousin of the sage.
Yeah. It's like used in like Central American, like cultic ritual shit that it's part of their traditional like culture, whatever, the shamanic culture. So it's just fucked, man. Like salvia is really it's even further out than LSD, although I have never really done like a lot of LSD, nor would I want to. But it's like for pound it's just fucked. And I've never done DMT either, so that's maybe that's even more crazy, but it seems from what I've heard that DMT is probably a little bit more, you're in control, you know what I mean? And you haven't just completely like absolutely lost control and like lost yourself or anything like that. So yeah, it's interesting. I always used to say, and I always thought, I still feel this way, that it was a positive experience to do psychedelics. That, well, I don't know if I could recommend that people do it, but I'm glad I did it. I got something out of it. Mm-hmm. And what I got out of it, I don't need to get it again. You know what I mean? Like I did that. It did something for me. It got me to a place, and I've done that kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I got a few more that. Yeah. So speaking of like deliriants, I mentioned deliriants earlier. Don't do deliriants. I did a few. I did gypsum seeds, and the worst one was I did Dramamine, which are it's like an anti-nausea pill that you take when you, like, if you get seasickness or something. And if you take a fuckload of them, you trip, and it's not fun. It's you can't move. You go into kind of like stasis, and like it's some of the strongest visuals that I ever seen. Like I was seeing demons. My friend's face came out of the couch and like crawled on me. There were like specters and shadows coming at me. It's terrifying. Don't do it. Another one that I experimented with was ketamine, which is a disassociative. And I actually have a pretty funny and embarrassing story that I'm going to tell you guys now about ketamine. So ketamine, it kind of like it's like a animal tranquilizer. Veterinarians use it, but when humans use it, it is a dissociative hallucinogen. And what it does is it kind of like it puts you in this weird kind of disassociated state where instead of like psychedelics where you kind of become one with your exterior, this like separates you from the exterior, and it like you become detached from reality. Well, there's this thing called a K-hole, where if you do too much, you go into this weird hole. It starts out, you feel like your eyeballs, your vision is you are like inside of your head, and you're looking out of side of like this like giant window or like whatever, and you're experiencing this weird outside that's completely different. And then you go into this place where like it's literally you go into this hole where reality is you falling into this hole and this weird patterns, and it's bizarre. It's really bizarre. So I went to this, I had a buddy that was cooking this stuff up, right? And he would just give it out for free. So he gave me some special K. We used to call it K, special K. And I go to this party that I got invited to. And I'm at this party, and everybody's drinking and everything like that. And I start talking to this girl that I liked. She was this cute girl, and we're drinking and we're talking. We were drinking strawberritas, which are like these strawberry like fizzy bitch drinks that have booze in them. Right. So we're drinking strawberritas, and she's like, she apparently really liked cocaine. And she told me, man, she goes, you know where we can get some coke? I was like, I don't have any coke, but I got some special K. So me and her, this story goes off the rails. So guys, like this is premium interior. Like this is from the archives, deep Dave lore that you guys are only getting because you pay for this show. Okay. So this is gonna get gross and weird and embarrassing. I'm gonna tell you. So I pull out this K. She never did it before. So we do this K together, which is a terrible idea. If you're trying to impress a girl or get a girl like all hot and bothered and loose, the last drug you want to give her is K, right? So we do K. I go into a K hole for like everything, just like I detach from reality. I go into this K hole, and I'm like completely just like drooling on myself for I have no idea how long. And we were kind of like hanging out in this back room. It was like this guy's, he had a big house. He's like a wealthy guy, big house party with a bunch of like frat boys and like different people and stuff like that. So I'm like K-holed out in this back room, just like slumped over, drooling on myself. And I finally I'm still K'd out and weird. And I like snap myself out of this K-hole, and I'm like feeling really weird and nervous and like sweaty. And I was like, I can't, like, I got to do something to break this. Right. So I have this technique that I do where if I take too many mushrooms and I start like freaking out, I jerk off, and it makes me feel better. So I'm like, okay, I gotta jerk off. Like I gotta jerk off and get this out of my system and like get kind of normal, because I'm completely fucked up right now and I can't let anybody see, because you get paranoid when you're in this state, right? You think people are looking at you and all this shit. So I'm like, I gotta get to the bathroom, and I see the bathroom, right? I see the bathroom door. But in order to like get to the bathroom, I gotta like kind of like walk through the room where like everybody's hanging out at. So I'm like, okay, be normal. So I get up and I'm like, okay, walk normal, be normal. And I did not walk normal. I come walking into this room like I have cerebral palsy, like I'm like a ostrich, like doing like this weird step thing, and like the music stops, and it's like one of them scenes where the stranger comes into the Wild West bar and the piano stops and everybody stares at him. I walk across this room like a weirdo, and the music stopped and everyone's like looking at me, and I'm like fucking, I go and I knock the door open and I close it behind me. And I'm like, that was fucked up. I completely fucked that up. Everybody thinks I'm weird. Everybody knows I'm on drugs, which everybody there was already on drugs, right? Like, it was like nobody was on drugs. So I like go and I'm like looking into the mirror and I'm like making these weird faces at myself, like making these weird faces, like, because I just look completely bizarre in the mirror. Like I have no bottom jaw. Like what I'm seeing in the mirror is completely bizarre. So I'm making these weird faces to try to like look normal. And I'm like, I this is so gross. I'm sorry, guys, but I start, jerking off and in front of the mirror. And I'm like making these weird faces, jerking off, and I hear like farts behind me. So I look behind. that girl that I was doing K with. She's like pooping, and she's like all freaked out too. Like I could see it in her face. She's like completely like nutted out, just like sitting there pooping. And I'm like, do you care if I do this? And she's like, I don't know. So I continue doing it. Right.
Oh God.
Stupid. Right. And I finish or whatever. And I like, okay, I'm normal again. I wasn't normal at all. I was like, fuck, okay, I got to go back. I'm normal now. I feel better. And I go back and I'm sitting there. And like, I'm like sitting there or whatever. And I just hear this guy yell, who the fuck jacked off in my sink? And I was like, that girl apparently immediately went and snitched on me.
Dobbed
the guy
you
at
in,
the
yeah.
party.
Fuck.
Yeah. So I panic. I get up and I run like full sprint across the whole house. Everybody looked at me. The sliding door out to the back.
Be cool.
It's open. So I run and I leap like a gazelle to go out the door, but the screen door was closed. So my foot just like rips the screen out. I fall down his steps and knock down a bunch of lawn furniture. And like I like the motion light outside goes on. And like everybody at the party is looking out the windows at me as I like stand up and I'm like, I'm holding this guy's screen and some guy yells, he goes, yo, Jared, some guy stealing your screen. And I panic even more and I run off into his cornfield and I call my friend to come pick me up on this road. We triangulate my position. And the next thing I remember, I wake up and I'm still clutching this screen, right? So I fucking ran off with this guy's screen, and like a few weeks later, I saw the guy that like was pissed off at me at the Walmart, and he's like looking at me real pissed, but you could tell that he wasn't sure if it was me or not. He just knew he didn't like me for some reason. You know what I mean? So don't ever do Special K. You'll like jerk off in a sink while some girl's pooping and fucking run off into a cornfield with some guy's screen. Don't ever.
So what was the second date like?
Oh, I never saw that girl ever again. I don't even remember her name. She's just some fucking girl.
Yeah, no shit. No, that's fucked, man.
Yeah.
What I think the most like hilarious part of that story for me is that like that it necessitates that at some point you were like, I'm so fucked up on mushrooms or whatever. I'm so fucked up. What am I gonna do? I know I'm gonna jerk it. Like, that's, for you, this was the thought process that you went through. You're just like,
it's true though. If you're like
problem reaction solution right there.
What was I? But when you're like, the Special K shit is fucking weird, dude. Don't do it. It's not good. It's not fun. It's just weird and spooky. And like, I was like feeling spooky the whole fucking time, dude. Like, you will do weird shit like that. So just don't even try that. What I will recommend though is LSD and DMT. So LSD and DMT, my experiences with these,
like together or separate?
No, don't do them together. Oh my god, that's a nightmare. You'll end up in the fucking asylum. Like you'll be like in Arkham Asylum, ended up being fucking one of the Batman's villains. But LSD and LSD is, you will really experience this. What's it called? Synesthesia, where like everything gets mixed up. But I've had a lot of LSD experiences that I actually told one on a previous, when I did the interview with Brendan Hurd. But I'm going to tell you about my DMT experience. And then I'm going to tell you about my final LSD experience, which actually changed my life. So there was these two trips together that kind of happened in like a week or two of one another. At this point in my life, I was like full blown scumbag, young 20 something, right? I was like mad about, I was a fucking edgelord atheist. I fucking, more than that, I was like full blown. I was like getting into like satanic stuff because it was so metal and cool. I thought it was based. And I was like, fuck laws. I was like a thief and just like a womanizer. I was just like a piece of shit young man from a broken home looking to like take all of my anger about my life on the world around me. I was a piece of shit, right? And I did DMT. You know, I don't need to tell the big story about how we made it, but I did the DMT. We made tea, ayahuasca tea. And the way the experience goes is I drank this stuff, and it's very slowly reality starts to like get weird, right? You start seeing trails, lights start getting really bright. You start hearing this like sound in your ears, and you just pretty much leave your body. And I left my body, and I went up through. It was like I ascended, and I saw this like it was like this great snake, right? I was going up this tunnel, and around me, the tunnel was these writhing, slithering, gigantic snake bodies, right? I never saw the head of the snake. I just saw the snake. And I come out of this tunnel, and I'm in like purple, abstract outer space, just like floating through space, like hearing songs and like weird echoes and in the distance of people's voices and hymns and weird shit. I'm just hearing weird shit. I see off in the distance this gigantic form coming towards me. It was like unfathomably large. This form coming towards me. As it gets closer, it was like a man. It reminded me of the Green Man, right? With his faces being out of leaves and trees and vines. And he was so big, like I was like the size of maybe one of his teeth or something like that. And he floats up to me, and he's sitting on this throne made out of tree and trunks, but he was also part of it. And it was all kind of like writhing and moving together, and it was like all this kind of stuff. And I come up to him, and I'm like, I see him, I'm like, what's up? And he speaks to me in this like very low droning sound. There was almost like I can't even describe it like it's language. He was just speaking to me in like these like this just weird series of sounds, and I understood everything that he said. And I had this like deep conversation with this guy, this being, right? And he like just like bestowed upon me everything that was wrong with my life. And was telling me just like everything about the universe. He's like, he's pretty much telling me you don't know. He wasn't speaking to me in words, but I just got the gist of everything that he was saying. And then eventually he just said goodbye, and he floated off, and I floated back down to my body, and that was it. That was DMT, and it was incredible. I went to this fucking other dimension and spoke to this being that I believed to be some sort of emanation or some sort of piece. I believe that it was Odin in some way, right? It was like
that's intense.
Yeah, it was
for sure.
And then a few weeks after that, I still was like kind of like whatever. I did way too much acid. I did so much acid at this point that I would just like start with a whole strip, right? This time, this acid must have been really strong because I ate a whole strip, and I had a horrible trip. You know, if you take a lot, stuff begins to become kaleidoscopic, and like you start like reality really kind of unweaves. And during this trip, I had this kind of fucked up. I'm gonna just like full openness, honesty with you guys. I had like my whole life like flash before my eyes. During this trip, it was showing me like all the evil shit that I was doing, and I went through this whole like process of like I started feeling like, man, why am I like this? You know, I started thinking of like it's like forcing me to think all the things that were wrong about me. I came to the conclusion that I should kill myself. Like I was like, I'm such a piece of shit. I don't deserve to live. The world is so beautiful, and the friends and people I have in my life like are I don't even deserve them. Like what do I give to the world? I give nothing. I take. I'm a destroyer. And I kept hearing that thing. The devil is never a maker. The less that you give, he's that's why I always bring that up, because this kept going on and on in my head. This Dio lyric, and I was like, I'm like the fucking devil.
Yeah.
Dude. piece of shit. And then I get through to the other side, and I came to terms with that I should kill myself, and the world's going to be better without me, and I'm a fucking whatever. And then I come to this realization that, like, you know, I saw the All-Father in DMT, you know, and he spoke to me and he told me this. And I was like, I don't need to kill myself. I can turn this around. I was like, but I need to do it with the help of the gods. I need to believe. I can't keep pretending this kind of stuff. And like, I came to the other side, and this whole thing, I'm like fucking crying. You know what I mean? I'm like crying. I'm like reduced to nothing. And then I came around and I saw the light and like all this kind of shit. And then it was like 12 hours of this, 10, 12 hours. I was like being tortured. This was a traumatic, torturous experience. And after it was over, I was like, I'm never going to do hard drugs again. I'm never going to steal again. I'm never going to be that rotten person. I'm a different person now. And it transformed me. And I didn't change all of my ways. I went back and forth a little bit here and there, and I was still kind of an atheist for a while. And I was just, you know, but like it changed me. And that was the most important experience I ever had with psychedelics. I never touched psychedelics again because I feel I don't need to. I was taught everything that they needed to teach me. And now what I do is I microdose mushrooms because it's good for my brain and it helps me with my cluster headaches. And that's all the psychedelics that I do. So that's my experience doing psychedelics.
That's crazy, man. Yeah, especially since like it's almost like it was one trip that was spread out over two separate drugs and two separate occasions. You know what I mean? Yeah, no, that's really intense that you have that revelation, and especially that it's sort of bound up with the religious ecstasy and the religious dimension of it and everything like that. You know, this brings us back to what we began speaking about, which is that psychedelics is supposed to give you this clarity of mind, right? Like this clarity of soul, this clarity of spirit. It's supposed to bring your, you know, the animating principle of who you are into the open kind of thing, rather than to cloud it as, you know, is done with salvia or certain other sort of like more malevolent types of psychedelics. It really sounds like you actually got the sort of the archetypal experience out of it, which is basically a religious experience, right? That's interesting because I can't really say that I've ever had that on psychedelics. I probably just didn't do enough of, like, you know, mushrooms or LSD to get that effect, because I've never had visuals. I've never, like, it's always been a crazy trip and everything like that. But that's another level. Like that's a meaningful, that's a life-changing experience, and not just something that's like kind of like having fun or like going, you know, balls out with your buddies or whatever. No, that's intense, and you can see that there's that religious dimension to it there. Absolutely. It's interesting that, you know, as an atheist at the time, that it just basically brought you closer to the gods. So, you know, I think that this is part of what, you know, McKenna is talking about when he's talking about like speed running through that, the religious experience, right? And how psychedelics basically gets you there straight away kind of thing. So yeah. No, that's amazing.
It was like, and then after that, and you know, I've had kind of this back, like before I realized I'm a heathen. Before that, I kind of always had this back and forth struggling with my faith and trying to kind of embody it and believe in it. And I secretly believed, but I know the world wouldn't accept it. And like, I kind of like had this struggle like my whole life. And then that phase that I had in my late teens, early 20s of being a real piece of shit and like kind of like, you know, if the world doesn't accept me, I'll fucking destroy it. And I had that trip, and afterwards I was like, I literally, while I said I did relapse on some certain things, like there's a couple times I went to parties, did some coke, or like, you know, I smoked some weed a couple times after that, and you know, but that was like the turning point that it like stopped. And if that never happened, I don't know what I would be or where I would. And the next day after you have a really hard, you're like completely mashed potato brain. You feel very vulnerable. And I went outside and I got on my knees, and it was the first time I ever prayed. First time I ever meaningfully prayed. And I prayed to the All-Father, and I asked him to teach me. And I said, don't let me become that guy again. And I said, I'll do whatever you say. And that you know, the devil is never a maker. The less that you give, you're a taker. And I wanted to be a giver and not a taker. And I wanted to change. And thank you, LSD, and thank you to the high holy gods and DMT and those experiences, because from there I met my wife and I had children and I joined the faith community and I'm never going back. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we all have different paths there. I mean, I've had my path to it has been in some ways kind of traumatic but has got me where I need to go. But yeah, no, that's intense that it happened to you through psychedelics, right? So I guess the lesson here is that, far from being something that's just, wholesale, just degeneracy or whatever. And there are degenerate elements to it, and there are transgressive elements to it. There are sort of, you can understand why people sort of look askance at psychedelics in some ways. But at the same time, this is just a brute fact that this is part of our religious experience. This is part of who we are as folk, as peoples, as Europeans, but also as, Germanics and Celts and so on. This is part of our religious experience, and to just sort of write it off wholesale is it's very short-sighted kind of thing.
A lot of guys use that word degenerate to kind of just label anything they're reacting against as things they don't like. And they don't really use the word correctly. Whereas just about anything that you abuse and makes you become degenerate is degenerate. Degenerate means that which is not generative. If a lot of people think that if all you do is read political books and it turns you into an incel and turns you into somebody that becomes withdrawn from society, and all you do is just read these books and over and over again, that is degenerate. You are not generative. Same thing with alcohol, same thing with drugs, same thing with anything. If you abuse it and it stops you from becoming generative, i.e. Having children, giving to your community, fulfilling the reproductive,
being fruitful in general. If what you are doing, if you are abusing it and overusing it and it stops you from being fruitful in life, that is degenerate, and you are being degenerative. Yeah. And I think there's an element of degeneracy too, where there's a kind of decay from a state of health, where it's not just that something is degenerate, full stop. It's that you've actually fallen from a state of health kind of thing, right? And that can be anything. Anything can, you can get too obsessed with exercise, and that can cause you to degenerate, and people have died young as a result of too much fucking roids and shit like that, right? That is degenerate too. So I agree with what you're saying there, Dave. Yeah, it's the whole degenerate meme is a little bit too much, but I do kind of understand where people are coming from in terms of psychedelics. But I think a lot of it comes out of this leftover, almost LARPy puritanical, like Puritanism, that, what you really need to do is just abstain and deny and live an ascetic life of self-denial. That's not the life we were intended to live. That's not the life that the gods have given us to live. It's a life of fullness and a life of experimentation and pushing boundaries, but ultimately coming home too. And psychedelics has done that for you. It's done that for others as well. It's an important part of the deep history of who we are as peoples. So to kind of write it off just because it's been contaminated with, the shitty politics of the 1960s, I think guys need to look a little deeper under the surface.
And also, there's a really cool resurgence of dark psychedelic stuff. You can go look at a lot of cool stoner rock and doom metal and stuff that's coming out. And it's not just about smoking weed and stuff. A lot of it has a lot of weird, esoteric, dream-like stuff to it. I know a lot of guys are really getting into this band, Black Magic SS. I like a band called Halas. There's a lot of bands that are just out there doing weird, cool stuff with the psychedelic sounds and psychedelic type of art.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that's what I was trying to do when I was in a noise band that, really sort of we considered ourselves in that lineage reaching from the Italian futurists through the modern composition classical composers of the 50s all the way to like the post-punk shit. I really feel that's what we were doing as well. We're sort of tapping into something psychedelic, and some of that music maybe someday will see the light of day. It was very dark and very weird and very moody, and sort of it really is there to take you on a trip kind of thing, and to put you into an altered state of consciousness. And this can be done by this can be done by poetry. It can be done by having meditative experiences. It can be done by all kinds of things, and one of those things is by psychoactive psychedelic substances. So yeah, no, it's definitely, it's a part of the human experience, and for people who've never experienced that, or who maybe can't experience that because of schizophrenia or having some sort of proclivity to something dark like that, I feel for them, because it's something that I feel was worthwhile.
Yeah. And one final thing I would like to note is not only don't listen to all like a lot of my weird, gross, goofy stories, or when I was a doofy teenager in an early 20 something, as an adult, if you're somebody that has a clean bill of health and a virtuous lifestyle, you're not going to do all that scumbag shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you're going to have a different experience than I did. But another thing I would like to note is some of the wonderful healing properties of some of these things. Psilocybin mushrooms. Let me tell you guys something. I have an ailment called cluster headaches. It's something that appears in like 0.001% of men of the population. It is the furthest extreme of the migraine. I don't have it chronically, but the chronic version of this is called suicide headaches, because most people that have them commit suicide. They're that bad. It is the highest on the pain scale, but I get them occasionally, and I end up in the hospital when I get them. It feels like somebody is taking a drill and drilling my eye out from the inside of my skull. It is the most excruciating pain imaginable. I would not wish it on my worst enemy. It's fucking horrible. And the only known treatment for this, outside of this like stupid drug that they offer you that's expensive as fuck and highly addictive and does brain damage, is psilocybin mushrooms. Microdosing psilocybin mushrooms is the only way I can keep these things at bay and reduce their effect. Right. So in addition to that, psilocybin mushrooms replace neural pathways. It heals neural pathways for people that have brain damage, for people that have damage from their brains, if they abused stimulants at one point in their life, if you're given Ritalin as a kid and you feel like you've never been the same. It just has wonderful healing properties for anybody with their brain. And not just psilocybin mushrooms, but there's lots of mushrooms that do this too, like lion's mane, etc. You literally rebuild your brain in a way that nothing else does. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, there's a psychedelic called ibogaine that heals people, literally cures people of opioid addiction, something that has destroyed our society. LSD, they give LSD to people that are on hospice to deal with the fact that they're going to die. You know what I mean? Like they give it to people that have extreme PTSD. It has wonderful healing properties for people that have depression and all of these horrible miasmic ailments, mental ailments that modernity inflicts upon us. Psychedelics has wonderful healing properties. And dude, the debate, it's not even a debate. Like this is proven. You know what I mean? So our ancestors were onto something with this. This isn't just wonderful spiritual stuff. It is also medicine. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like anything, it's a tool. It has an application. Outside of that application, it is, quote, degenerate, unquote. But it definitely has something that it's intended for, right? It's been given to us as a gift from the gods to get us closer to them, perhaps in some cases for some people, for others just for a bit of recreation, but for some people it's a matter of life and death as well. So Yeah.
Yeah. So don't write them off as whatever. Here's the thing is like normie basic bitch society is light switch brained. We're supposed to be built different. And one of the ways that we need to be built different is to be dynamic thinkers and think in a more nuanced way and understand things the way that our ancestors did poetically. So don't look at psychedelics as something that's just this degenerate drug or whatever. Look at it more nuanced. And I would suggest I actually recommend you need to at least try LSD one time in your life. You need to try mushrooms one time in your life, and you should try DMT one time in your life. Screw all that other stuff. Those things are really special, powerful spiritual tools. And also, sometimes they're fun. They're fun in a way that you don't get normally. When I microdose mushrooms, sometimes I'll take a little bit extra, and it is so spiritually healing. I lay back. I'm a fucking dad, man. I got bills. There's so many stressors in life that build up this gunk and goo in my brain. And when I take this stuff, it relaxes my body, releases those things, and it's just a wonderful tool. It's a wonderful medicine that heals us in ways that you aren't going to get from a doctor.
Yeah, I think basically everyone should do it at one point in their life. It's just hard to like endorse and be like, go out and do it. But I really feel bad for people who never have. So, yeah. So, Mr. Oh man, we're going on 2 hours. I knew this was going to be a doozy. Yeah.
You have anything else you want to close with? You want to wrap it up? Because I know it's getting late for you.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think we've said quite a bit about that and a lot of good stuff too.
Excellent. All right, folks, this is Psychedelics with the Culture Dads. If you want to get access to all of our episodes, make sure to go to imperiumpress.org/podcast and go sign up to the Gumroad to get access to all the Culture Dads episodes, as well as hardback books and many other great perks. Lots of great stuff over there. Buy books. Buy Steel Storm 2. Dark Enlightenment's going to be dropping from Nick Land. You're going to love that. So get a copy of those books, as well as if you want to check out some base fiction, bro, come check me out at thebizarchives.com. Follow us on Twitter and Telegram at The Bizarchives. New book dropping very, very soon. And I think that's it for the episode, guys. Hails and blessings to each and every one of you guys. I appreciate you guys. Appreciate your support. And I'll talk to you guys very soon next time here on Culture Dads Age of Sword 7.